Very good. It's 1 o'clock, so we'll begin the meeting. We have about 6 items on the agenda, so we'll try to move along as quickly as possible. We kind of have 2 items on the agenda for the joint meeting of the Renaissance Zone and the Economic Development Incentive Committee. And then, so we'll kind of go from there. You can stay for the whole meeting, and if you're on the Renaissance Zone, you're not required to unless you want to. Okay, with that, we'll begin. First of all, thank everybody for being here today. We'll start out the agenda with number 1, the proposals for the 419 3rd Street North location. And Jim, will you get us started with that?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pepcorn. What I wanted to do is to go through the proposals and look at what criteria the city set up and kind of how these two compare one next to each other. The proposal I used for Kilbourne was that second proposal that it seemed like, you know, that was their probably preferred option, as well as seemed to be the preferred option of these committees. And so, you know, the criteria that the city commission adopted when they put this property or made this property available for offers, there were 8 different criteria. You can see them on the screen. I won't read them, but we'll kind of go through them one by one, so you can see how each of the proposals, you know, fit with these particular criteria. The first one was, is the proposal consistent with the downtown plan? And I put preferably residential because that was in the RFP, because that was a particular land use that was preferred in the land use plan, the downtown land use plan. Authentic Housing is proposing 181 apartment units. They would have 10 enclosed parking spaces. Kilbourne would be 115 apartment units and 152 parking spaces. So certainly both uses are residential. One has significantly more parking than the other, so it's whether or not you're concerned about the parking. The second criteria is good design and the quality of the project. I just included the images here. I'll leave it to your judgment if you think one has a significantly better design than the other. There are kind of floor plans in both of those also. The criteria number 3 was a large amount of private investment. Authentic Housing, they've kind of given us 2 different business plans, one at 40 million, one at 50 million. They would be using primarily low-income housing tax credits and housing bonds. Kilbourne Group, for this particular size, would be at 25 million. It would be all private investment. The purchase price, Authentic Housing has lowered their purchase price. They would like the land at no cost now. The Kilbourne proposal was $162,900 as their purchase price. The ability of the developer to implement the project, Authentic Housing has never developed a project before. They were incorporated in January 31st of this year, about 7 weeks ago. So their ability is really unknown. They haven't done a project before. Kilbourne Group has done a large number of downtown Fargo projects. They've been active in the downtown since 2006. The financial feasibility of the development, with Authentic Housing, I think is unknown. There's still no market study. There's a lot of unanswered financial questions that our financial advisor had brought up that we don't have, real meaningful answers to. And, it's a novel concept, so it's difficult to know the feasibility. Kilbourne Group does have a successful track record of developing similar projects in the downtown. These are some of the questions that our financial advisors had asked, and this is why 3 weeks ago we asked for some additional information, primarily on the loan amounts. Our financial advisor said there's really no meaningful detail in those letters, as far as what's the interest rate, the loan amount, loan term, debt service coverage, loan to value ratio, any appraisal requirements, and the borrower developer financial questions. They did provide some information from potential tax or credit syndicators in terms of what the market is now if they syndicate the tax credits. They acknowledge that market study has not started. One of their plans was that they were going to have place-based vouchers. Those are under the control of the Housing Authority. Now they're thinking maybe they can get by without those, although I think it was an important part of the financing. The project manager is not determined. They suggest it could be the Housing Authority or someone else, but we don't have details on what those costs might be. And also, I guess it was one of their lenders had sent me an email and said that they were seeking to partner with a public entity on this. This was news to me. And so I don't know if they need another partner, but this letter notes that their financial strength is going to depend a lot on the financial strength of their public partner. And I guess we don't know who that is. We can certainly ask. They're here today. Criteria number 7 is, could the implementation begin within 1 year and be completed in 3 years? With authentic housing, we really don't know the timeline and how long it would take to put this financial information together, so I think that's unknown. Kilborn Group would meet that schedule. They'd like to start this fall, provided the City Commission makes a decision to select them, probably within the next few months, and hope to open in the spring of 2024. But again, as we delay a decision, that may be pushed back. The criteria number 8 is experience with related projects and past history. Again, Authentic Housing has not developed a project before. Kilborn Group, I listed the 6 new apartment buildings that they've developed in the downtown over the past several years. This is some rent information, and this is, I think, why a lot of some of these low-income housing tax credit projects with the 4% credit struggle to be feasible. And it's probably one of the reasons that Edge Artist Flats was relatively slow to rent up. So what I have here is, this is the income limits. And so in order to qualify for this housing, your income needs to be below that amount. These are the rents that Authentic Housing is proposing. So in order for this rent to be no more than 30% of your income, you need an income of at least this amount. So I think you end up with a relatively narrow range of incomes that this works for. So let's say a 3-person or a 4-person household needs a 3-bedroom apartment. They're going to need to make $48,000 a year in order to afford the $1,220 a month rent that Authentic Housing would charge. Yet the income limit, they can't make more than $54,000. So it only works for people between $48,000 and $54,000. That range gets to be even tighter in their larger units, where in order to afford the $1,400 a month, you would need to make $58,000 a year, $800. Yet your income limit is $59,220, so you have this range of $420 that you have to be between. And so I think we really need to see some sort of market study to see if there's a demand for households in this, and then you add on to that to the fact that there's no place for them to park their car on site. It seems like a relatively small market. What are the next steps? This committee, if it's ready, would provide a recommendation to the Fargo City Commission. The Fargo City Commission would then decide to accept that offer. We would work with our financial advisor and our city attorney to put together a development agreement and look at whether or not the incentives are required. And then the final approval doesn't come until that interim work, when the city commission would approve a development agreement, laying out the price and the timeline and how fast they would need to move to implement a project. So we have to answer any questions.
And I think what we'll do is, if there's any questions from the group here, and then the developers are here too, so if you have any questions of the developers, and I would say, we're not going to have open public comment at this meeting, but when this goes on to the city commission, then there will be plenty of opportunity for the public to comment at that time. So with that, we'll open it up for any comments or questions from either committee. Go ahead, Jim.
Question for Jim. Can you refresh our memory on what incentives, if any, Kilbourne requested in their proposal?
It was a fixed amount. I think it worked out to about approximately a 12-year property tax exemption, probably 5-year Renaissance zone, and some TIF help beyond that.
And so at that point, it would still have to go through the Renaissance zone to be approved for the Renaissance zone part of it, and then the same thing, it would go through this committee for that approval.
The TIF assistance of approximately $3 million, but as Dave noted, that would be reviewed.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep. Go ahead, Arlette.
Jim, can you give a little background as to that time frame? One of the criteria being the time frame.
Sure. I think part of the criteria was we wanted a project that was ready to go, and so we can get development along the river versus waiting several years. And so criteria was that they begin within 1 year and be completed within 3 years.
So there's nothing imminent that's pushing that kind of time frame.
I guess the one thing I would jump in to comment about that is, just last night with the 32nd Avenue project, costs are going up 30 to 40%. And so if we keep pushing this, I'm guessing most of the developers will just say, we have to restart because the costs of everything are much different now than even when we began the initial interest in this. And so I guess that's one thing that I think if we don't take action on this, then they're just going to move on. And I'm not a developer, but maybe I'd be happy to hear anybody else comment, but I'm guessing that's what would happen. Thank you.
I think what the developers have said, until the architecture is going to take probably 3 to 6 months. You're going to need at least 3 months just to figure out where your foundation is and surveying and all of that. And so typically a design is going to take 6 months and to bid things before you can start. And so 6 months from now, unfortunately, we could see snow again. But so I think the sooner the better if we really want to see some demo and construction start this fall.
Any other comments or questions? Prakash, and then the mayor.
Some comments and maybe a question also for the authentic housing one. Listening to last few hearings, the concerns of the community, the people, my heart aches listening to the concerns. Is there a need for it? Yes, definitely a need for it. If I were to make a decision based strictly from my heart, hands down, I'll make a decision in support of the authentic housing. My concern is right now is looking at all the data. I don't know whether their proposal, as it talks about, is an affordable housing, if they can afford to, is the proposal itself will not provide an affordable housing because I don't know that they have the financial backing. And that is not clear. I think the city requested that information. And if Jim is saying that they haven't provided it, that is a concern to me. Secondly, I think, so that's a question I would like to have them give a chance for them to respond to that. Number 2 would be, have they calculated all the amenities such as daycare, the grocery store, all those into the calculation? Because I haven't seen that. Because, sounds what they're presenting is, the concept is a fascinating one. We need to have something like that in the city. That may be something that the city needs to take a look at to do that. But this is an apples to oranges comparison for the two proposals. I have never seen one proposal like this so it was so hard for me to compare because the RFP calls for the space is given to them, so based on that, the two parties made the proposals. And so it's impossible to compare this. And so I'm struggling. I'm struggling to make that decision. So the two questions I have for the authentic housing one would be, do they have the backing? And can they stand behind their proposal, and can they make it happen? Because I'm concerned looking at the proposal, whether they can, I don't want to say it'll be a failure. I love to see that happen, they succeed, but I don't know whether they can make it happen. Number two is, did they calculate all those amenities as part of the proposal?
If you can introduce yourself for the rest of the group, if you don't mind doing that, and then answer precautious questions, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Tyrone Grandstrand. I'm a founder at Authentic Housing, so I'm representing Authentic Housing today. Before I start, will you go back to the rent slide? So this is incorrect. The way you calculate income limits is you use the number of bedrooms and you multiply by 1.5, and that's the household size. So for example, a 4-bedroom is actually the 6 household size limit. That doesn't require 6 people live in it, but that's how you figure out the income limit. So the 3-bedroom one is incorrect, the 3-bedroom one is incorrect, and the 4-bedroom one is incorrect. This is a learning.
I mean, these are from the HUD website.
Yeah, no, the income limits are correct, but you're connecting the 4-bedroom to the 5 household, but it's actually the 6. And you can look up on the HUD website that they'll explain that it's 1.5. I would suggest checking everything I say with the housing authority. You know them and trust them. We're sure about what we're telling you, but it would make sense to do some background research on that. The question about financing is, in the original RFP, we weren't asked to provide letters of intent. Nobody was. 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, we were asked to provide letters. We got 5 letters, 3 of them from equity partners. One of those equity partners said they would love to co-develop with us, and 2 from lenders. Now, the process to work with lenders takes longer than 3 weeks. They have to really look at the pro forma and the proposal, and some, like the AFL-CIO Housing Investment Trust, they want to make sure that our numbers match up with using 100% union labor. I have an email from them today that explains that. So it takes a little bit more time than 3 weeks. The normal process for affordable housing is you get site control, and you apply for tax credits, and as part of that process, you get a market study. You lay out your full team, meaning if you have development partners, which since December, we've said we would partner with the Fargo Housing Authority, and they said that we could tell everyone that they will partner with anyone who's doing affordable housing in Fargo, and we would accept that offer, and we need that experience from them, especially the Fargo specific experience. And they'll also do our property management. And Chris from the Housing Authority has verbally confirmed they'd be willing to do that. And he also let me know that he's told that to Jim. So they'll do our property management. We don't have a contract, but the questions that we were asked didn't ask for a contract. And normally you would do that as part of applying for the tax credits. The amenities, so by using the qualified census tract benefit with the tax credits, you can build common space, anything that will benefit people under 60% of AMI. So it's a pretty broad group of things you can do. And so for the laundry facility, it would be just a typical laundry facility. You know, essentially we would run it. You'd just buy laundry machines and you have an attendant. And that gets paid for from the revenue that it creates itself. The childcare, we would do an RFP and we would contract with somebody who would do the work, but we wouldn't charge them any rent at all. And so in exchange for that, we would ask them to give a discount to our residents through one mechanism or another. And the same thing would be true of the grocery store. The co-working space would just be available to everyone in the public, and the resident lounge would only be available for the residents. So what we calculated is no income at all, and our proposal still meets all the margins of safety required by lenders and banks, and more. We ran stress tests on our proposal also, which I can tell you about in a second. We're not assuming any income, but we'll pay all the utility costs for them also. So no income, and we are taking on some costs. But then the exchanges will get them to do more work for the community to create more public benefit. And all of these things, except for the resident lounge, will be open to the entire public. So we ran stress tests on our pro forma as part of talking with particularly the equity funders. And we found that for our project could continue to work even if interest rates increased by 149%, even if construction costs increased by almost 100%, even if we reduced rents a further 15%, even if vacancy was 23.5% forever, even if energy costs increased by 620%, and even if, as we put in our original proposal, we did a parking agreement with the city, which we offered and we've repeated multiple times, even if that cost $18 million. So there's lots of margin of safety built into this to make sure that it's safe for lenders, it's safe for equity investors, and it's safe for the city. And we're willing to cooperate on what that looks like exactly. And that's what we've tried to communicate. On experience, Jim is correct about when the company was formed, but we included in our original proposal our lead developer, that's the core of our experience. His name is Joseph Frewer. He's worked in New York City primarily. In the last decade, he's developed 800 units. Just to give a comparison, in the city of Fargo, there's been 400 units of affordable housing developed in that same time frame. The state of North Dakota, which decides whether or not we would get tax credits, have said that he is qualified to do this work. And so we would rely on that and the Fargo Housing Authority once we get a contract signed with them. What we were planning on doing is getting all this stuff lined up after the site was awarded. And we put that in our original timeline, which laid out all of the things that we talked about. You mentioned the timeline was unknown, but it's in the original proposal. And we meet the requirements for it. Did I miss anything?
I just want to clarify, the Housing Authority indicated to me they've only had a cursory discussion about managing the project, and they're not happy with what you propose as a rate.
Yeah, sure, and that would be okay. We provided 8% in our proposal, which is, as the financial advisors said, was maybe a high rate
I
for
just
what
wanted
they've
to
seen.
clarify what they
No,
said to me.
I understand, but we'd have plenty of room to negotiate that. That's no problem. That would be a normal course.
Prakash, did you have another question?
Yeah, your name is Tyrone, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Again, I told you, very sincere about it. My heart is aching. I want this to happen. But you were given an opportunity. You knew there was going to be a meeting here. And when we met earlier 2 times, I think certain information was not provided. That's why we asked for additional information. Still, when I'm seeing this, the data is not there. You're standing there and telling us that, yes, we can afford this, and the financial backing is there, but it is not provided. So how would we make a decision not knowing this is going to happen? We need to see something from a banking or a financial organization to see that this is going to happen. Other than taking your word for it, and we took your word for it, somehow we need to have that happen. That's where my discomfort coming from. And the rest of the things you answered very well. I also have concern about parking. Very much a lot of concern about parking because I don't know whether you can afford or not. I don't know you will find a family without a car. So you can say that they're going to go and use public transportation, and the public transportation is not well used in this town. We're allowed to see people use that. So I would have loved to have seen some parking incorporated as part of your proposal too.
Right. So we could spend up to $18 million renting spots from the city for $106 a month. That would be more than 900 spaces, which would be more than I think would be reasonably required. And we said in our original proposal that we'd be open to discussing the amount that you want, The DMU zoning doesn't require it. The RFP didn't ask for it, but we knew that it would be an issue, so we decided to say we'd be open to discussing exactly how much would be wanted by the community. And the parking ramp is a 3-minute walk away from the site. And then I just want to ask, did you receive the 5 letters of support that we submitted? 3 from equity providers and 2 from lenders? Okay.
Go ahead, Mayor.
So Tyrone and I met earlier to talk about a variety of different options. You don't own the site here, but Burrell Housing Authority owns the Burrell site. The Burrell site, they do, and the Housing Authority want to work with Authentic Housing to do a site. It's 14 million versus 50 million. It's a site in which you could have a negotiation about parking. We could have a negotiation about the grocery store, the daycare center, all those different things that group wants to put in. Also, to get tax credits, they have to go out and apply for that. That is a better timetable. The Housing Authority is ready for that to go in 2 years. That allows us 2 years to get everything to work together and things to happen. Dr. John Strand and myself, we think the Burrell site is a good site that could be utilized for an experimental type of proposal. And when Tyrone says no problem with this and that, what this group does, when it goes to the commission, then it's analyzed by our financial partner to see if it's feasible. So when you say no problem with this going up or that going up, we get a financial advisor that looks through all that, your assumptions, their assumptions, and gives us at least comfort as a commission that yes, it's affordable. So it is a little bit gutsy when it's your first project, but we think we have some partners that could help you make it go through and happen, which much less risk than this project that we're talking about today. And so my suggestion is that we have Housing Authority work with Burrell site, with the Housing Authority, Authentic Housing as partners, and I think that's a feasible, could work out as a great experimental type of project and is more feasible than this present one you recommended.
Mr.
Thank
Chair.
The mayor mentioned the Burrell site. Let me just show you where that is.
Yeah, that was one of
This
my
is the proposed site. We're talking about the Burrell site. There's a Burrell building right here. It's a little over 100-year-old building. There's also another building the Housing Authority owns. It's attached as a colonial building, also I think about 100 years old. There's an alley here, but the Housing Authority owns this parking lot up to about this line. So when you look at this entire Burrell site, it's very similar in size to the proposed site that at 419 3rd Street. You know, I don't know if this building would ever be for sale, but that could be explored. But I've walked through this building. This building needs to be redeveloped. And I know they have a hard time renting the apartments just because of the condition.
And who owns that?
Steve's next, and then Deb.
The Fargo Housing Authority is the owner of that building.
Okay.
Tyrone, you had mentioned that stress tests had been completed. Who did the stress test?
So we did it internally.
Internally?
But the financial advisors wrote in the first report they sent to you that we had a good, solid project that people would be interested in investing in. So I don't know what tests they ran internally, but that statement essentially agrees with what I just said.
Thank you, Dave. Comment, not a question. Prakash, you mentioned we've been comparing apples and oranges, and that is difficult. And John, you mentioned we've never had a project like this before. And one of the things I think Authentic Housing has come up against is you need site control before you can answer some of these questions, like who is going to be the housing manager, who. And lots of times banks don't want to go through all the work of doing all the pre-approval if the project isn't going to happen. So there again, you know, they've been up against some real tough odds. I'd like just to remind everyone. And I'm all in favor of Fargo having something like this happening.
I guess, go ahead, John, but I get to make comments and some of the chair. I think the good news is I think both these projects can happen. I think that's the good thing. And so I do think it's been eye-opening because this is a total, we knew that coming in. It's a totally, but I think both of them can happen. So with that, go ahead, John.
Mr. Chairman, Tyrone, thank you for bringing the proposal forward. It's unique, it's innovative, and we talked about that the first time you did that. I also cautioned you that as an innovative project, you have to prove it. And Prakash has pointed out very, very precisely, you're giving us now what we asked for, saying that you've got, coverage of 150% here, you can have rents change at all these amounts. I have to tell you, after working in finance, and I would defer to Steve, I've never seen a proposal with the type of coverages that you're talking about. You don't need any incentives to build that.
Right, we didn't ask for any.
Well, you don't need the free land, you don't need anything. And the concern is if you can't get underwritten and the loan for this, the whole project will die. And we'll be 3 years down the road. We'll be 3 years delayed in trying to find affordable housing downtown. And we're going to set back the whole project. And so I would encourage you to take a step back, and I would encourage the city, instead of trying to write a policy around this project, let's go back and write the policy and determine as the city what we're going to provide to incent this, and go out with a new project and a new request for proposals. I think you're right, Mr. Chairman. We'll end up with both projects in that manner. We will get terrible policy by trying to write it to fit a proposal. And I just encourage that we don't do that.
Very good. Any other comments? Arlette?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would certainly echo that completely, that we do need the policy. And more than likely, we will have to have some kind of involvement in a project like this. What I am reluctant to see is this property that shows an opportunity for perhaps a project like this to slip out from under us. I don't know the relationship with the Housing Authority, whether they've committed with this property, whether Authentic Housing would be interested in that property, and what would be different. Either way, we have to develop policy that indicates what our involvement would be. So I just have to argue that we need to address that now and delay any kind of activity or action on this particular property until we've figured that out.
I guess I totally disagree with that. I do agree with John that we need to have, we can't be making policy to fit projects. But the one thing I will say is we have 4 commissioners in the room. We all support low-income housing in the downtown. But you have to use Beyond Shelter and the Fargo Housing Authority, and it's very complicated. And so it can happen. We can do it. We have 4 votes sitting right here in the room right now. So that can be done. But to me, I think you have to be very careful that that you're voting with your heart instead of making good decisions with taxpayers' property. That's my comment. So I think the whole delaying it, good Lord, we've delayed this 6 months. And this whole thing of costs are escalating rapidly. And so this is not the time to be talking about that. So I totally agree with your comments, but to try to delay these decisions, we've done that. And it's time to, as a chair, to me, I think it's time for us to make the call. And the other thing that's going to happen after this, it goes on to the city commission. So everyone will be able to have their opportunity, including the public, to have their comments. But that's it. All right. Any other comments? John?
Mr. Chairman, in all this, this is not a zero sum. We have the ability to recommend to the city commission a very, very exciting project for that property. A project that we've never seen in the downtown before in cooperation with developers. So it's not that we can just continue to sit and hold on this. I quite frankly think we've damaged our reputation with developers by not having a good, clean, swift process in all this. And what the policy has to address is, I'm thinking we're going to get a better project if the city is going to write a policy that's going to include a provision for parking as part of the request for proposals. That the city, and I don't want to write your policy, but if the city were to say, we're going to give parking vouchers in the downtown for a minimum of 200 units as part of the incentive, we're going to include tax exemption or tax increment financing or any other type of incentives. And what we're asking for is this assortment of affordable housing in these ranges with this type of incentive package. We're going to have, I think, the strength of all our developers coming forward saying, we can do that. The developers aren't saying we only want to develop upscale. They want to develop properties that cash flow. And if we're going to provide incentives and serve this market, the city needs to put those incentives on the table and stand behind it and say, this is what we expect from the project. And I think we're going to get a lot of good proposals that way. I'm not afraid we're going to miss anything, Arlette.
Jessica?
Yeah, I just want to,
No, Jessica's next,
sorry.
then you.
Thank you. Tyrone and Authentic Housing, on behalf of our committee, I know you've put a lot of time and effort and gone through and tried to be as thorough in a minimal amount of time as possible. So everyone that's reached out to all of us to give us additional information, asked for meetings, thank you for doing that, because we're only as good as we have the information available to us. So thank you for your intention on doing that. Also, I've been on this committee for almost 10 years. I know that some of us maybe have been here a little bit longer. This is the most robust conversation that we have ever had, and I've met with more people in the public in the last 10 years. So I think, yes, it could be a struggle for developers that are used to a process that is very outlined and upfront. But at the same time, we learned about a need that is slightly different than low-income housing. It's workforce housing that is a niche of low-income housing. And that they have different things that they need to accomplish. And not every developer is going to want to work in that space. And not everybody wants to or has the ability to. And I do agree that we are right that we could do both projects. But I would hope that in our carry forward into a recommendation would be that the city would complete a workforce housing initiative that we can look at what are the specific needs to send out RFPs to fix this problem on a larger scale than one individual piece of property, because it's a lot bigger than that. And we would not have had this amount of robust conversation, these critical conversations, if we didn't. So I thank you for bringing it forward. I don't think we should stop this process, but we have problems and situations that we need to move on and be productive on. And that's, I think, that's all I got to say.
Any other comments?
I just want to respond to Commissioner Preston's question on the Housing Authority. I think you're probably aware of this, but if you're not, the Housing Authority is appointed by the Fargo City Commission. Commissioner Strand, the liaison to that. And per city ordinance, any decision of the Housing Authority can be reversed by the Fargo City Commission. So there's a great deal of control over that board by the City Commission.
Very good. Any other comments or questions? Are we ready for to actually make a motion, or would you rather not? Or it's up to the committee.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to recommend to the City Commission the approval of the Kilbourne project. I don't know how we call them, 1, 2, or 3. I call it number 2, the middle one, so.
It's proposal 2 is the Kilbourne one.
Okay.
Can I don't know protocol, but can I amend your, or suggest another, that we bring forth option number 2 of the Kilbourne's proposal for this site on condition that the city of Fargo would look into a workforce housing initiative and collaborate with multiple partners, established and non-established, to figure out a solution in whether it's the Burrell site or something else.
Can I just jump in real quick? We are doing a housing study, and I would assume that actually the housing study is going to include workforce housing, low-income housing, downtown housing, and so all that will be part of that. So if you, I don't know if you're aware of that, but if you want to
Yeah.
know more about that, that's another, go ahead.
I think we have new components within all these discussions that's come out since we might have started that, that haven't been discussed or wouldn't have been known to look into. So it could be an extension of that to say, let's hyper-focus in on what we learned. Is there anything else we need to adjust? I just don't want this to fall off the map and have it be a significant amount of time before we really think about how to get traction on this.
Mr. Chairman, and just sort of point of order, I would go back to a split motion, because you may have somebody that doesn't want to vote for the Kilbourne proposal, but wants the housing study. And so I would really just want to keep it to the motion specifically, that the duty of this committee is to make recommendation to the city commission, and that our recommendation would be the Kilbourne project number 2. And I think then the next motion would be.
I just want to comment on your thing, the housing study isn't done, and Commissioner Strand made me aware last week that we're having considerable problems in our homeless population and getting people into a safe environment. And we may have to look at a different segment, not workforce housing, but vulnerable population housing. I don't know what you'd call it, John. Would that be a term? And we're having people that, when they get back out on the streets, are unable to survive, and/or we've had some people commit suicide. So we have real concerns that in a certain segment, we may have to address that sooner than 3 years, and we do have some options on that. So what I'd like on your second motion is, let's work with the planning department, look at the housing needs, and start setting priorities. What needs to go first? Authentic Housing may step in here nicely, and we may be able to do a nice project with them. We may have to do an engagement center closer. We have a building next to the library we could utilize for that for 24 units. So I'd like to at least allow us to have a little flexibility with that, because mental health issue in the community of Fargo is becoming a bigger issue right now, and we may have to look at some options in that. So if we're going to step up and try a variety of different things, I think fantastic. Let's get the people in planning to work with us and the different commissioners to work with it as well. I would second your motion.
So now we have a motion by John. Did you second it? Okay, so if it's okay, we'll vote on any further discussion, but then what we'll do after that, after you vote, then we'll have an opportunity for a second motion, if that's okay with everyone. So are there any, go ahead, Arlette, do you have a comment? Go ahead.
I'm going to go back to this particular parcel again. The concern I have here is that we are constantly looking at the issue of how many units we need projected downtown for residential development. And the number that keeps getting thrown on the table is 500 per year. The trouble is, we don't know of that 500 per year, how much of that is market-priced rental versus that lower income worker housing versus subsidized housing. And that's the segmenting that we need to know. And again, I go back to this as an opportunity to actually perhaps do something on the workforce housing side. I don't want to see that go by.
Any other comments or questions? But I would say that goes into what Jessica was talking about, that with this housing study, we need to look more specifically at the downtown and the types of housing. And so that's, it's just a little bit finer.
Do you want me to
Go ahead,
call the
Jim.
roll? Mr. Cosgriff?
Aye.
Mayor Mahoney?
Aye.
Jim Boos?
Aye.
Jessica?
Aye.
Commissioner Pepcorn?
Aye.
Commissioner Preston?
No.
Reed?
Aye.
Gosh?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Deb?
No.
With that, the motion carries, and now we have an opportunity, if you would like to make another motion, if anybody else would, now's the time for that.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to research and put together an initiative for vulnerable population and workforce housing.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Steve.
Mr. Chairman, for purposes of discussion, the question would be, should there be a time frame as far as, okay, we have we're going to do
Date
this.
certain?
But the sense of urgency and the importance of, should it be within 1 month, 2 months or something? I would like to have, then we're all accountable for it and we make sure that it gets done, presented, and come up with a game plan.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Jim, can you tell us when the housing study will be done?
I believe MetroCog is out, I think it's a 6-month study, Commissioner Preston, is that about right?
Yeah, they're just finishing up with the RFP, I believe, getting proposals in.
So it'll take 6 months?
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, at least for one part of it, can we look at vulnerable population
Well,
needs over maybe a
Yeah.
couple months?
If I could add to that, this is going to be an overall, high-level kind of housing study. What we're talking about is taking a segment of that and diving deeper. So we're talking more time to do that.
Yeah, I'd want to defer to the planning department then on how long they think that might take.
So to Steve's question,
Yeah.
timeframe is then mitigated by the planning department? Would that be the answer to that?
I think that intent is to try to get the consultants to do that additional deeper dive, but that probably isn't going to be possible until the initial overall overarching kind of study is done. I don't know if that answers your question.
But I think the main thing is that to be done in collaboration with the MetroCog study. And to me, it's a finer point of that overall study. And I do think that's a good thing. But I don't think to start a separate one until that's done, I don't think that makes sense. I do think it's good to have a timeline, but we don't really know for sure. And you know who the chairman of the MetroCog board is? You're looking at him, so I apologize. So I apologize.
Good, then we can settle this right now. I think we could easily put and do things ourselves. Like we know we need the study, but what we can do and we do have control over is identifying a group of diverse people and who the stakeholders are to get that in by the end of summer so that when the study comes out, we're already in discussion, already having meetings, and we can come back with results by the end of the year of like what we're going to do. So we can control that.
That's excellent. Any other, so we have a motion and a second, so now we're doing the discussion, just so we don't lose track of where we are. Go ahead, Mayor.
Commissioner Strand, I hate to call on you, but you're working with some group that's looking at the vulnerable population. Will you have some answers in 2 to 3 months? I hate to catch you off guard, but I know you're working with Nicole on this particular issue.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm on the moment's notice here, but I think we already know a lot of this information. I think there's a lot of different silos in town that have data available to us. They're just not communicating with each other. This topic here has raised that awareness a lot. And I think, Commissioner Preston, I feel bad that I didn't input more to the RFP process and policy proactively. We're missing, by not having that roadmap properly in place, we're maybe missing some opportunities and catching up. But those studies are coming. There's an immense need for supportive housing. There's an immense need for workforce housing. Just no question about it. Everybody knows this need. I don't know that we need to wait 6 months to know it's 188 or 240. But we all know the needs are there. With the diversion coming, with workforce housing needs, it's pressing that we have available, accessible workforce housing. So however this all goes, I hope we don't lose sight of that need, because very seldom do we have an opportunity to leverage a public asset into a result. When private developers do something, that's one thing. When we have a public asset, the land that the public owns, and we're asking for meeting needs, I just, and frankly, I'll say one more thing. Community development is where this conversation happens. And community development's kind of been absent in this process. And again, that's partly my fault. But so I just hope we don't lose opportunity and lose sight of these needs and kick the can too far down the road and go, we tried.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
If I could just address the whole issue of resource allocation to get something like this done. Is there anyone from planning here? No, I don't see anybody. So I've had conversations with them about getting some of the work done that you've had the conversations inside Community Development Committee. I'm worried the resources aren't there. So if we're going to get this done, and Michael, I don't know if you've got a response to this, we've got to have the staff and the ability to get it done. And that's what worries me.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, John.
Jessica, maybe what we need to do from our committee is we have within our control certain things that we can provide and as a committee to keep this moving forward. Commissioner Strand talks about the silos. We're one of those silos. I hate to admit it. We should put on our agenda for discussion, what are the things in our toolbox that we can provide and make available as incentives to deal with the problem. We don't have to completely identify how many units are that, but what are the things that we would say from what we deal with, can we provide? And if each committee and each silo will do that, as you bring it all together, you can then build your program and say, you know, these are some very powerful tools, all brought together to solve the problem. So I would support that our committee look at what we're doing and say, and we do that all the time. We've just gone through the process of where we're going to provide focus with our economic development incentives. Let's just bring workforce housing, low-income housing into that mix and say, maybe that's the one that we're going to provide the most incentives to.
Go ahead.
This conversation is actually wonderful. The issue is, and it seems to me, it's not necessarily just what incentives are on the table, but so if we look at the neighborhood of downtown, it is an employment center, and we would hope to encourage those that are working downtown to live downtown. So what incentives, yes, can we bring to the table? But are there other issues, such as what's been suggested today, diminished or decreased cost of childcare, the access to transit? So it's a broad discussion. And yes, incentives are an important part of it, but there are other issues that we need to look at. And I don't know where that conversation needs to happen and what kind of resources need to go into that. And I'm sorry, I truly don't think we have the numbers and the ability to determine that at this point. We still need to understand better exactly what those needs are and how we fund it and where it needs to be. It needs to be located close to an employment center. I am rambling a little bit here, but it is a complex question, and it's not something that's going to be easily answered, and it's going to take a wide variety of perspectives at the table to figure this one out.
I totally agree with you, Commissioner Preston. I think there's definitely a lot of silos out there. As involved in business for many, many years, I don't know what the issues are. I know there's a problem. How do we address it? How do we deal with it? Also with this workforce now, you're finding many, many people, even in the low-income area, that are working from home or working from other areas. What impact does that have on all of this area, and what do we need to do to assist that? I guess I don't want to get this caught in the idea that it takes forever to come up with the statistics that we need to do to find out what the problems are. And I don't know if you need an outside consultant or whatever. Do we really need that? Do we not have the talent internally from private sector, public sector to sit down and talk and say, hey, this is what we're experiencing, this is what we're seeing, and here's concerns and issues that we have. Bring it all together and come up with some solutions and the facts and information that you were referring to.
Okay, we're kind of covering a lot of very deep topics here, and it's very inspirational, but at a certain point, we got to, if you wouldn't mind let's repeat the motion, that we already have a motion and a second, and then if there's more discussion, that's great, but otherwise, I think we're getting a little bit,
I'll try to.
go ahead, Jessica, then we're gonna move on.
My intention wasn't because we do have silos, for us to kick the can to somebody else. I think like, you're very true. There are silos. Everyone's got their own data, but the exact people that are asking for this project are more than willing to share their need and what they're experiencing. So I think we have a wealth of knowledge to go on. So I think the tax exemption committee could pull off another subcommittee and be the glue that reaches out to people and try to get this thing to happen, because the hardest part's going to be starting. So to kind of whittle down the motion, it would be the approval for the tax exemption committee to reach out and try to find other stakeholders and put together an initiative that can go alongside the workforce study or the housing study, and start to put together some guidelines to come back with some recommendations and just get started. Let's just start having the conversation.
I guess I'm confused now, because is that the new motion, or do you have a second, or? I'm sorry,
know.
Jessica, I'm not that bright, and so this is getting very complicated to me. And
I'll second the modified motion.
But we also have to follow the rules. We have a motion and a second, so now we have a second motion and a second, and so that's what troubles me.
To kind of qualify the motion.
Yeah.
That's why she did.
You can withdraw your first motion.
I withdraw all the motions. How about that? We'll start, the tax exemption committee will take ownership of starting the initiative to look at vulnerable population and workforce housing.
Second.
Now we got three motions.
What was the other two?
You withdrew her motion.
Good. Yeah.
So so now, if it's okay, let's repeat the final one, and then if there's any comments or questions, then we're going to vote on it, okay?
Sounds great. Motion is for the tax exemption committee to take ownership of forming an initiative for vulnerable populations and workforce housing.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, the only issue I have is limiting it to that. This is something I'd love to be involved in. I've got the time and the heart for it, and so that would be my only issue with it, just being that committee. If we can expand beyond that, I'm fine.
By ownership, I mean, we're finding stakeholders, public and private, within the city of Fargo.
I think we have to be, if you don't mind me jumping in, I think we have to be really careful, because this is getting to be a big topic that I'm not sure this is what the proper venue. To me, this is the city commission, and this, anyway, this is the tax incentives group with the Renaissance Zone, and now we're talking about things that's just my opinion. I totally support, I get what you're saying, but now we're getting into this an hour long, and this is how we get 3-hour-long commission meetings.
Would
Mr.
the
Chairman,
commission be willing to appoint
I'm sorry.
people to work on it?
Yeah, I would have trouble with
Can you bring that forward?
tax
then?
exemption just being the driving force here. It's got to be broader than that.
If someone's willing to do it, we just need to make sure that some group somewhere that's the appropriate group brings it forward.
I would suggest that we figure this out before the city commission meeting where this issue comes up, and I'll come with a motion. Somebody will come up with a motion.
So all we're saying, within the confines of the tax exempt committee, you are going to look at some things that we might give incentives in the tax
Yes.
committee, but we're not saying how community development does or what John does with his committee, and he may look at the community and say, we need to look at childcare. We're looking really at the tools we have, how can we help incentivize that? So that would really be the tax exempt committee to do that. Renaissance Zone members could as well be part of that if you chose, but you're saying the task is within this committee. We don't normally have meetings where we're all together to do that. It appears we have a couple volunteers, and I hate to turn down volunteers, but I'd ask Jessica, if they did volunteer, could they be part of that? And we'd look more at economic incentives, or we're going to write a criteria for a certain project that will include certain things. So you would have that. So I could see that happening, Commissioner Pepcorn, but I also see your concern about, are we morphing outside of where our boundaries are?
Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we'll have a roll call vote. Jim?
Yeah, I should mention too, we do have 2 openings on the Economic Development Incentives Committee, and usually our meetings aren't this long, but if you're interested, you can apply online.
So can I get
Just-
some clarification on the motion? Is it just in regards to incentives?
Yes.
Okay.
Jessica?
Aye.
Mayor Mahoney?
Aye.
John Cosgrove?
I just want to say it's a great committee. Don't use this meeting as the one. If you do want to volunteer, I'd welcome you to the committee. Aye.
Jim Boos?
Aye.
Dave Pepcorn? Commissioner
Aye.
Pepcorn? Steve? Deb?
Aye.
Commissioner Preston?
Aye.
Reed?
Aye.
Bakash?
Aye.
I think the only other item we had was to talk about the other site, and we're still looking at if there's a way to do both of those, and so I think we'll let you, the Renaissance Zone group adjourn, and we'll continue with our agenda after a
You're
brief
welcome
break.
to stay if you want to, and I would, and I would say the whole thing about looking for more volunteers on the committee, we would appreciate that. And basically what happens is, if you're interested, you can go online and get the information, or from our staff. Then it goes, the mayor goes through them, we review them, and then it goes to the city commission. And so anybody that's interested, we'd love to have you join us. So that's right.
Thank you.
With that, we'll take a little break. It'll be like 15 seconds, and then we'll resume the economic development. We just have a short agenda, so. Back up. We'll start back up again. We just have 3 short topics. So we'll begin with number 1, approve the EDIC meeting minutes of 2/25/22.
Move to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 2, request for tax increment financing. And it's page 5 through 7. Jim, will you get us started with that?
Yeah, our process now for tax increment financing is to first come to this committee to see if it's the type of project that you'd like to work on. Get this image up. And so what I'll do is I'll have Jonathan Gasper from West Acres, representing West Acres Mall, talk about the need for this redevelopment. You're probably all familiar with the former Herberger/Solander's building, been vacant for a number of years. And so if you feel this concept is worthwhile, then we would get into looking more specifically at, the need for the incentives, both in terms of a financial review, but then also documenting whether or not there's extraordinary conditions that would require TIF assistance for this. And so with that, I'll have Mr. Casper talk about the proposed development.
Chairman Pepcorn, Mr. Mayor, members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about our project we've been working on here today. I'll digress for 1 minute, having had the opportunity to sit through the last discussion for an hour, and I would say as a developer and a property owner in this community and a manager of probably north of 2,500 apartment units in this community, I'd be happy to participate in discussions as far as feedback on any kind of criteria that you're putting together. I'd also add, I think Off the top of my head, I probably involved in managing somewhere between 700 and 800 units that meet the rent thresholds that were put on the board earlier. And I'd say right now we're probably 10% vacant in those buildings. So there's, 80, 90 units there that I'd love to rent. So, call alliancemanagement.com, check it out. Anyway, there's available units to rent there. I'm excited here to talk, getting back on topic here, about the opportunity to redevelop the Herberger's site at West Acres Mall. I want to start by saying I've been involved for almost 10 years in development here, and I'm grateful for this committee and their work in investing in our community. I'm also grateful to West Acres. We got representatives of the West Acres team here for the discussions and work we've been doing for the last 6 to 9 months or so, looking at how we could, or what we could possibly do with this site. And I think it's important to mention, looking at the 50-year history of the mall, as a community, this is really, you step back and look at a map of the city of Fargo and sort of stick your finger in it. This is really the center of our community. And we've been blessed to have great stewardship and management of this site and this real estate asset. But we're also at a time where there's an evolution happening at mall sites around the country. And here's an opportunity to take on this project, to redevelop the site, increase the asset or the real estate value of the asset, improve the circulation of the site, and take the site and this part of our city sort of for the next 50 years. As part of this, I think it's important we took the time to study the criteria that the committee has put together and worked on as part of the TIF process. I would point out, there's a memo that you've been given that outlines that. Without reading that to you or going through the whole thing, I think there's 10 criteria, there's 6. I think 9 of the 10 criteria this project meets, and that's laid out and explained, but I think there's a few that I'd specifically like to mention and run through before we entertain questions. This is, like I've said before, this is a center of the city, but which means the infrastructure is in place. We have parking in place. We got the access in place to the site. If you look at, and ask the question, is this compatible with the adjacent area and future uses? We're proposing a project that would have roughly 50,000 square feet of retail with 160 to 180 apartment units. There's apartments in this area. There's demand for housing in this area. There's employment at various levels within blocks of the site. I think anybody that's spent any time in the mall has to commend West Acres for what they've done with art. I think there's going to be an opportunity within the project where we'll have access between the mall and the project, and as part of the landscaping and the development of the site to include public art. And I think maybe, as much as any private institution in the community, they've done a tremendous job with that. So that's something we can expect to see. I think, today we have an asset that's been sat vacant for 4+ years, that value-wise and tax base-wise, we're looking at 10 to 15 times the increase. So we certainly meet the criteria of expanding the tax base. And I think as far as encouraging additional new development, on the West Acres site and adjacent to this site, there are areas that are going to need redevelopment and new development. And I think the city supporting this, I think a successful project here will just continue to spur that development and revitalization of the center of our community here.
Very good. Thanks, Jonathan. I get to ask questions first since I'm
go
the
ahead.
chair. First of all, my first question is, are there apartments going to have accessible apartments? How many are going to be accessible? And then my second question is, I know you have parking, exterior parking. Is there going to be any enclosed parking?
Yeah, there will be underground parking that will be sort of lot line to lot line on that image that you're seeing. So you have roughly 90,000 square feet of internal parking, and then you'd have the floor of retail, and then above you'd have floors of residential. And typically it's above the required amount, but as the developer, manager, and potential property owner, we like to have as close to one parking space per bedroom as we possibly can contained in the project. And as far as accessibility, I have to get back to you on the exact details on that. But as we design this out, we would certainly meet or exceed the demand for accessibility for the units.
Jim, just a question. How long is TIF that you're going to have them assess?
Yeah, we haven't run those numbers yet at this point. It would just be a motion for staff to work with the developer on a renewal plan and a financial plan that would
Move to
make sense
approve.
for the project.
And we have a motion, and do we have a second?
I'll make a second and I have one question for Mr. Casper, if I
Okay,
could.
just so we follow the rules, we have a motion and a second. Now we're doing discussion. Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you, sir. Is the current assessed value 700,000 for this property?
No, the assessed value exceeds 700,000. I think it's roughly around 4 million.
That's what
I think
I
they're
thought.
paying about 60,000 in taxes a year today.
Got it.
Any other comments or questions? And maybe, Jim, you can just kind of summarize, if this passes today, what is the order? What happens next?
The next steps, first of all, there'd have to be a rezoning. This is commercial, so they'd need either a conditional use permit or some planned unit development to allow housing on the site. We'd put together a renewal plan over the next several weeks. We could probably get this to City Commission maybe late May or late June. I would go to our financial advisor to determine whether or not the requested level of assistance is appropriate given the rate of return.
Very good. Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Very good. Thanks, Jonathan.
Mr. Chairman.
and Good luck. Number 3 is co-schedule. That's the next, and then we just have one item after that. Jim, will you take that for us?
Yeah, we have a request from Co-Schedule. They're currently located in downtown Fargo, and they're looking at acquiring a building and expanding operations. We have attending virtually is Justin Walsh from Co-Schedule. I didn't know a lot about the software, but learned today that our communication staff down the hall use it for a lot of their information. They find it to be a very good software. But maybe John Mahachek has worked with this company quite a bit with the economic development, so maybe he can talk a little bit about the importance of this company to Fargo and the
So
downtown, and then we'll have Justin Walsh tell us more about the company.
So John, you can start, and then Justin, if you want to join in, if that's okay, we'll go ahead. Go ahead.
Sure,
John.
and I'll try to make it quick. And yeah, so I was excited to see this on the docket. I visited with him a little over a month ago. Is kind of exploring what programs are available if they're expanding. Their lease was coming up, and this is a company I admire quite a bit. It's great to see a primary sector company doing some expansion here downtown. I was thinking about on the walk here too, how when I first met with them, it was really before Co-Schedule even was a company. It was they were a marketing company Today Made, and I met with them and talked about what does it mean to maybe have some talent here in Fargo. And they added their first 2 or 3 staff in the co-working space, then moved to another location, and then grew again. So obviously the project's great. We're going to look at a FlexPace loan for it at the next board meeting for that, for the financing. The no-brainers, the jobs that'll come with it, it's good jobs. But also what's great is them investing in their downtown location. It's a very visible building on the corner that kind of needs, I think, a little life in it. It'd be good there. I think it's good aspiration for other tech startups to see this in the downtown, and the fact that I know that they hope to, with some of the open space they have, to kind of allow some startups to be in there as well. It's kind of like a gravy for me on this project. So I don't know. Great project, great company. I really admire them. They're great corporate citizens as well. They really encourage their the past and present employees that I've got to know have always been very active in the community, side businesses, different meetups they do. Yeah, I can't say enough good things about Co-Schedule, and then Justin and Garrett as co-founders.
Justin, you want to tell us a little bit more about the company and be available for any questions?
Absolutely. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you, John. That was quite a remarkable introduction there. One thing that we've always said, once we got to know John many years ago, is that whenever you're going to do something big, you call your CPA, your attorney, your banker, but you always call John. He seems to have just a wealth of knowledge and is such an asset to Fargo. So, John, thank you for all the help and advice over the years to CoSchedule. It's been much, much appreciated. CoSchedule has been around Fargo now for 8 years at a various number of locations downtown, but we've always been downtown. In fact, to the point where it feels a bit like it's a part of our DNA as a company. The idea of not being downtown just doesn't really doesn't resonate with us. It doesn't resonate with our team. So the question of where will our next office be, it will be downtown. We went out searching for opportunities, and this building just happened to be sort of the right size, the right price, the right opportunity for us to take it. Like John said, breathe some life into it. It needs a fair amount of rehab on the exterior. It needs a complete new roof system. So there's a good investment to be made here. But what's nice is it's largely empty. And that's something that allows us to move in and fill it. We would basically take this building to about 80-90% right away. And there's a few other tenants in there, but like John said, over the next 5 to 10 years, we easily see it as being where some of those other spaces or even space within what we're carving out for ourselves can be used in flexible new ways. Something that as a tenant, as a leasee today, we just don't have a lot of that flexibility. So allows us to grow in the next 5 to 10 years in downtown Fargo without feeling constricted by the space we're in. And also to just start putting some additional dollars back into downtown Fargo in the form of just value creation and owning this asset and improving it, hopefully, for many years to come. So a little bit more about CoSchedule, not the project. We're a software company. Thank you, Fargo, for being one of our customers. We have customers all over the world. In fact, only about 1.5% of our revenues come from the state of North Dakota, which means the large majority of our revenues are generated from out-of-state contracts and businesses. And we're taking all of that and putting it back into a professional staff of people in the Fargo area. We're proud to be in Fargo. It's something we're very proud of. And there's I think, a great history and legacy of software companies in Fargo that we get to be a part of now. And excited about this building opportunity and the project. We've got a lot of things happening very quickly, and I appreciate Jim very, very much for helping me kind of see some of the opportunities here, including this tax incentive program for property taxes, and just weed through how that program functions and works, and is becoming an important component of this project, and especially our exterior renovations. Just construction costs and things as of late gone up substantially. And so, helping to curb some of that and allow us to really see the vision we have for the building come around to 100% complete is awesome. So thank you, Jim, as well, for all your help. But willing to take questions. I don't need to go too far with this unless there's something else that somebody's willing or wanting to know.
Thanks, Justin. And Jim, can you just, on page 11 and 12, can you just kind of go through the key numbers for us and just summarize? Obviously on page 3, talks about the number of employees is 48, and they're projecting it year 5 to go up to 65. Can you talk a little bit about the cost of the building and things like that?
Yeah, they're looking at putting about $500,000 into the building. I think if you look in your packet that was passed out, there were some red lines in it. Because the company won't use the entire building, the percentage of the building will be exempt, will be just the space they occupy. And so our city assessor made some adjustments to the application. Also noted that it's going to be owned in a different corporation and will be leased to CoSchedule, although it was the same owners. But again, the existing value is $1.4 million. They're looking at putting $500,000 into the building. The annual amount of the tax exemption is a little less than $28,000. I don't have the red line in front of me, but you can see that in your packet. The number of jobs, these are higher quality jobs. about half of them will be between $28 and $35 an hour, and half of them over $35 an hour. The first year expansion would be from 48 to 50, then it'll increase over about a 5-year period to an estimated 65. Certainly, if they do better, they may go up even faster. Again, they're based in Bismarck, but their operation here in Fargo is much larger, and this is where the expansion is occurring. I think it's great that they are going to be in downtown and make that major investment. They're asking for a 5-year property tax exemption. The recommendation is to approve based on our criteria.
Jim, can I ask, the Renaissance Zone, is that a separate, would that not be included in this, or is that a separate issue?
Yeah, this building did receive Renaissance Zone assistance like over 20 years ago, and so with that program, it's one and done, and so this is, I think when that one was done, it sort of met the qualifications of the program. It was a part of a 3-building deal, and this one did receive Renaissance Zone, and so it cannot receive that again.
Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we'll accept a motion.
Well, when we look at your number calculator, normally we'd like to be over 100, and we're at 188 on this project. So Justin, great work. I'm glad you're doing good work, and this building does need to be rejuvenated, so pleased that you picked it as a site. I move to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Just a second. No added anything. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Last item on the agenda is committee membership. We have 2 openings. We've talked about it earlier. We would love to have 2 new members, and we'll come and knock on your door. And if anybody's interested, please contact our city office.
I think John volunteered today to be on that committee.
After he's seen what happened today, I think there's a lot of people that are going to be dropping off because they're not interested. All right. Thank you, everybody. It's 2:21. It was an excellent meeting. Thanks for all the good discussion. Thanks for coming. We are adjourned.